a landmark document affirming the rights and freedoms of every individual, regardless of race, religion, gender, or nationality. It reminds us of the shared responsibility to uphold dignity, equality, and justice. Let us reflect on the progress and challenges ahead as we reaffirm our commitment to a world where human rights are universally respected and protected. Together, we can surely make a difference. The chair for this program is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, Distinguished Professor IMPRI. The lead advisor and legal hands-on session expert, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, visiting Senior Fellow IMPRI, Advocate, Author and Researcher, Gender and Human Rights. The conveners for this course are Dr. Ajay Gudavarthi ji, Advocate Celine Thomas ji, Dr. Simi Mehta ji, and Dr. Kumar ji. The expert panel for today includes Ms. Vahida Nainar ji, Independent Researcher, Gender and Human Rights Consultant, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, Visiting Senior Fellow IMPRI, Advocate, Author and Researcher, Gender and Human Rights. We will also share the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind attention. Before we start today's session, I would like to state the housekeeping announcements. Please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions on the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise. Refrain from making general comments in the questions to save time. To begin with today's session, I would now like to invite our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting Distinguished Professor IMPRI, to give her opening remarks. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Avi, for introducing the course. And now we are on the day 6, very important day of historic significance, mainly because it's an International Human Rights Day. I welcome, first of all, I congratulate Dr. Ajay Kudavarthi, Dr. Celine Thomas, Dr. Shalu Nigam, Simi Mehta, and Arjun Kumar for putting this course together and today's special program. I welcome Dr. Vahida Nainar and Dr. Linda Lane and Advocate Shalu Nigam, today's resource persons. And as Avi said, that Human Rights Day is celebrated every year on 10th December. It is also a concluding day of 15 days of campaign against gender-based violence, which was a resolution which was universally accepted by member countries of the United Nations in 1993. This important day reminds us of basic freedoms and rights that belong to every single person on this planet, and irrespective of their ethnicity or nationality or class, caste, and geographical location. So it's a time to reflect on how far we have come in protecting human rights and to recognize the work still needed to make this right. So that balance sheet we need to have on this day. This year's Human Rights Day's theme is Our Rights, Our Future, Right Now. And it highlights the transformative power of human rights in shaping a better future. Human rights are not just ideals, they are the tools that empower individuals, communities, and nations to create a world that is more peaceful, conflict-free, which is more equal and sustainable. And by embracing these rights and taking action today, we lay the foundation for the future we all deserve. That means peaceful and harmonious world. Brief recap of what all has transpired in the previous 5 days. The day 1, we talked about the concept of social inclusion and various peace agreements that have also played a pivotal role in making the understanding on peace in a public as well as public life. And Oslo Agreement of 1993, Belfast Agreement of 1998, Colombian Peace Agreement in 2016. They were the watershed. And we had a keynote address by Mr. Sandeep Chachra, who spoke on decolonizing peace building and democracy, views from the global south, and he also quoted several economists and political scientists of the 70s and 80s who made a path-breaking contribution on decolonization, connected the concept of political democracy with the material reality and the political economy. He also quoted Franz Fanon on decolonizing mind, and also he said that it is very important that we don't have a spawn slogans on decolonization, but we should have a very concrete agenda for social transformation by strengthening the social movements. After that, we had Ms. Rita Manchanda, who spoke on narrativizing women, war, and peace in South Asia based on her personal involvement of attending various peace negotiations, working in the refugee camps with women, and also extensive traveling that she did. And she emphasized women-centric, bottom-up, gender-sensitive peace negotiations, and which only can ensure sustainable peace because local agency of women is very, very important. And we had days two, we had Professor Swaran Singh. He talked on the new frontiers in global peace, where he talked about inclusive peacemaking for cyber conflict resolution. He also gave several definitions of peace, and which in a different social context, or even the oriental and occidental context, has a very different meaning, where the oriental context talks about internal peace, while the occidental context, according to him, which talks about peace outside, that means resolution or conflict resolution when the wars are taking place. And he also talked about violence, peace, and peace research, and what kind of hybridization that we require in terms of peace praxis. We also had a presentation on by Dr. Gladstone Xaviers, who spoke on the navigating displacement and peace, and policies and practices for refugees, forced migration, and conflict. His presentation was based on a participatory action research, where he gave a very vivid description of condition of refugees and migrants, refugees due to climate calamity, refugees due to war. He talked about his experience of Sri Lankan refugees, Tibetan refugees, Myanmar's the Rohingya refugees, and he demanded 5 important things, which is a stakeholder engagement, disaggregated data, inclusive framework, nothing about us without us. He reiterated that slogan, and he talked about equitable allocation of resources and their accessibility to the migrants and refugees, and monitoring and evaluation by the human rights organization. After that, we had Dr. Sina Paul's erudite presentation on how to do the essay and research article writing on this subject, where she went into the technical details and the step-by-step understanding of how idea transforms into a final finished product of an article. On day 3, we had Advocate Flavia Agnes, who gave a very detailed and meticulous profile of reforming legal systems and feminist insights into gender-based violence, started with Mathura rape case in 1980, and she gave her critical reflection on 498A, Dowry Prohibition Act, Indian Evidence Act on rape, and POCSO, and also the working with the survivors of sexual violence. And she said that though Majlis is a small organization localized in Mumbai, but they see it as a model, that how hand-holding, because whatever you may talk, but your concrete intervention and hand-holding of the survivor of violence is extremely important. Dr. Shalu Nigam's legal hands-on that day focused on backlash and resistance, the violence against women. At one level, the women's movement has been working for past 40 years, but there is a tremendous and very, very aggressive backlash from the misogynist and hypermasculine forces. And she also gave several examples of social media campaigns and actual ground level campaigns by the women's movement. And she also gave that it is important to strengthen the civil liberties and human rights forces. On day 4, we had a Naila Ali Khan, who gave a very lucid and groundbreaking lecture, and her lecture was on interplay of gender, community, and nationhood, reimagining peace in Kashmir. She gave an insider's view of what's happening in Kashmir, the misreporting, misinformation campaign, some of the irresponsible formulations by the diaspora community, which is creating lot of misunderstanding about the Kashmir issue, and she said that what we need is that we need a locally rooted women's movement. We need to strengthen it. And she said we also need a very iconic figure like Lal De, who had questioned self-abdication of women, subverted reliance on men, and brought in watershed in culture and spiritual world of Kashmir. And after that, we had a very interesting discussion about feminist icons of Kashmir. Dr. Shalu Nigam's second legal hands-on focused on first of all, she started with the tribute to Constitution Day, 26th November, and she also said the glorious contribution made by 15 women who were in the Constituent Assembly, and how recently, like we see, increasing interest in their work in public domain and their writings. And she ended by focusing on Article 21A of Constitution of India, which defines the state-citizens relationship to bridge the gap between intent of the law and implementation of law. And she averred that inequality and injustice, hunger and poverty are political issues. They can't be individuated. Individuation of these issues is very limiting. On day 5, we had Dr. Stuti Roy, who spoke on world peace and focusing on peace building, peacemaking, and peacekeeping. She brought in so many new sensibilities and ideas. And she also began with deconstructing the work of Professor Johan, who has played a very important role in conflict resolution. And he talks about the 3 phases of conflict resolution: before the violent culture, first of all, and second is during the violence, what happens and what has been the role of women, and post-violence, what are the realities. And she also focused on decolonization of conflict resolution discourse. She quoted Gayatri Spivak, and also she spoke about, critiqued feminists like Gloria Steinheim, who had also accepted the neoliberal project and also the warmongering and peace building vis-a-vis what was happening in Syria as well as in Afghanistan. She mentioned Azad Issa, where she said that why we peacekeepers rape, no? That book that she has written. And she also talked about the strength, how many peacekeepers are there, like 110 nations have 1 million peacekeepers. They are also socialized and trained in a militaristic, hyper-masculine way. And that's why we hear so many horrifying reports of these peacekeepers also using the same tactic of sexual violence against innocent civilians. No. Third legal hands-on on Dr. Shalu Nigam was on women's rights in conjugal relationships. So we began with the political peace in the political and public arena and came down to peace in personal life. And she gave a very, very vivid description and the learnings of Fulmani Das case of the conjugal rights, and also Rakmabai Save's fight and against her forced child marriage. And she is also talked about age of consent, restitution of conjugal rights. And she also mentioned Giselle Palicot's French lady whose husband betrayed her trust and invited all strangers to rape her, and videographed 1,200 video films he made. And she said that this is the reality which creates tremendous distrust among women. She also mentioned women's movement in Korea, which fought collectively against videographing of women in all the places, whether it's a hotel or mall or where the change room in the in a toilet block, where the hidden cameras were capturing women and humiliating them. Against that, M&M campaign came up. And today, now we have on Human Rights Day, we have equally erudite and competent experts, Dr. Vahida Nainar, Dr. Linda Lane, and Dr. Shalu Nigam. Over to IMPRI.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Without any further delay, I would now like to invite Ms. Vahida Nainarji, independent researcher, gender and human rights consultant, for her session on the future of equality and dignity, addressing emerging global challenges. We welcome you, ma'am. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can someone tell me it's 7, 6, 17? How many minutes do I have?
45.
45. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. So I will share my PPT. Okay, 1 second. Mm, okay, I'm not sure why I'm not able to.
Should
just,
IMPRI share it?
just 1 second. Yeah. Let me shut that. Yeah. Okay. Share. There, I'll play, make it large. Yeah. Is that visible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much as usual. I will 1 second. I will have to do this because of my unfortunately bad thing.
Yeah.
Here. Okay. Okay. I'm not sure why this is not moving.
It's not moving. Then I will also, I think, yeah, I'll also
Just
stop my
one second.
video. Yeah, I love it. It may be problem of bandwidth. Yeah, is it?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the problem is, but let me try again.
Yeah.
That's not working.
Have you sent the PPT to IMPRI?
No, it's there. No, I haven't sent it. I'm not really. Let me see.
Visible.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, yeah, thank you again for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to be part of the IMPRI panel. So today, actually, I'm going to talk about the effectiveness of international law and women, peace, security, generally speaking. And that's the topic of my work today. And what are these, how is international law effective? What are the challenges? What are the limitations? And the topic will be discussed today with only one example, that is the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict. And then I will go about talking about the impact of Israel's genocidal war on women, peace, and security, move on to talk about the general accountability, what measures have been taken within international law by different agencies and their effectiveness, the limitations or failures of international law, and the successes. And then we conclude the topic. Before I begin, I want us all to observe this particular slide that we have. And this is a map progression of the region of Middle East from 1917 to 2017. And the map is pretty much the same, or as we speak, the map has changed to complete white and almost spots of green. So I will just leave the map on for just a few seconds. I would want all of you to please absorb this, because this is basically the context within which this conflict is taking place. And that puts into perspective. Few seconds, rather. And that's it. Now we can move on to discussing the topic. So what is the impact of Israel's genocidal attack on women, peace, and security? Generally also, but specifically on that. One is a direct attack on the security of the region, of the people in the region. There is complete lack of security and there is increased threat to life. Women, girls, and children overall are among the most exposed to the danger of this conflict. There are several figures available based on the impact of this, based on what point since last year has these figures been accessed. So, for example, from April 2024, almost 35,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed. Around 14,500 has been children of this and 9,500 women. Almost 77,000 have been injured, of which 75% are estimated to be women. 8,000 are reported missing or under the rubbles, and at least half of them are assumed to be women and children. And almost a daily 37 to 100 women are being killed, and 17,000 uh, children have been orphaned since the beginning of war. This is April figures. So as we speak, that figure must be or is obviously a lot higher. Then you have personal vulnerability. So according to UN reports, women are being targeted in Israel by Israel with such viciousness. The attack is indiscriminate and the attacks are disproportionate. And it seems to spare no means to destroy the lives and deny women, children, people their fundamental rights. A number of women and girls have also been forcefully disappeared by the Israeli military since the beginning of the Israel onslaught. There is an elevated risk of sexual and labor exploitation. Elderly women and those with disabilities faced highest level of neglect and violence. Then there is social disruption. The eruption of violence and destruction has already resulted in almost 500,000 women and girls being displaced from their homes in Gaza. 1.5 million are internally displaced. Then, in terms of economic uncertainty, 1.1 are projected to face catastrophic levels of food insecurity. Women have become widows and new heads of household following the death of their husbands, fathers, or the male members in the family. And situation is particularly difficult in Palestine because the laws in Palestine assume women to be under the protection and guardianship of men. They do not have most of them do not have the means, the ability, the training to take on the leadership role, the ordinary women. There is, of course, the health deterioration of health. According to UNFPA, around 155,000 pregnant women and new mothers are struggling to survive and access basic health care. The treatment of pregnant and lactating women continue to be appalling, with the direct bombardment of hospitals and deliberate denial of access to healthcare facilities by Israeli snipers, combined with lack of beds, medical resources, placing an estimated 50,000 pregnant Palestinian women and 20,000 newborn babies at unimaginable risk. Many women are giving birth every day without pain relief, while hundreds of babies have died because of lack of electricity to power incubators. These dreadful conditions have resulted in increase in miscarriages up to 300%. 95% of pregnant and breastfeeding women face severe food poverty. What has happened? This is the factual situation about women, impacting women, children, but general population in Palestine, particularly Gaza today. So what has been the various measures or accountability that has happened and the extent to which international law has been effective? One is that several leaders of several, particularly 15 United Nations agencies and humanitarian organizations have called on the state of Israel in a joint statement to cease its assault on Gaza and on humanitarians. These are all United Nations affiliated agencies as well as independent and international humanitarian organizations, such as the International Council of Voluntary Agencies, the International Organization for Migration, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UNDP, the UN Settlement Program, the High Commissioner for Refugees, Population Fund, Children's UNICEF, UN Women, World Health Organization, World Food Program. All of them have, in their separate reports, called on and highlighted the situation, and in a joint statement. It is interesting what they write in their joint statement. They say the situation unfolding in North Gaza is apocalyptic. The area has been under siege for almost a month, with people denied basic aid and life-saving supplies while bombardment and other attacks continue. In few days, hundreds of Palestinians have been killed, and most of them women and children, and thousands have been forcibly displaced. Hospitals have been almost entirely cut off from supplies and have come under attack. killing patients, destroying vital equipment, and disrupting life-saving services. Health workers and patients have been taken into custody, and fighting has been reportedly taken place inside the hospital. There have been dozens of schools which are serving as shelters have been bombed or forcibly evacuated. Tents sheltering displaced families have been shelled and people have been burned alive. The rescue teams that go to help have been deliberately attacked and prevented in their attempts to pull people buried from under the rubble of their homes. And the needs and women, they also document how women and girls have been overwhelmed and they overwhelmingly affected and how their needs are growing and have been unmet. There are reports, they say, of civilians being targeted while trying to seek safety, and men and boys being arrested and taken to unknown places for detention. So the entire population of North Gaza is at risk of dying from disease, famine, and violence. Humanitarians are not being able to do their work and are blocked actively by Israeli forces from reaching people in need. At some point in the last year, Israel Parliament also banned the United Nations Refugee Agency and revoked their privileges and immunities. This ban has since been lifted. The ban was diametrically opposed to UN Charter with political dire impacts on human rights of millions of Palestinians, which was dependent on the UN, our refugee agency's assistance, and it is in direct violations of Israel's obligation under international law. In their statement, they conclude that this blatant disregard for basic humanity and for laws of war must stop. So that's what has been the UN's own different agency have been recording. And it's not just the agency. There are most of the UN special rapporteurs have also included the situation of Gaza in their reports, several of them, and call for immediate ceasefire. These are Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, on a situation of human rights in Palestine, on right to housing, right to food, right to safe drinking water, or Special Rapporteur on internally displaced persons, and on protection of freedoms while countering terrorism. So as we know, the Special Rapporteurs are experts as part of the special procedures of the Human Rights Council. They are the largest body of independent experts, and they work in the name of the council, and they are council's independent fact-finding and monitoring mechanism. And all of these reports also state similar facts as the ones stated by the leaders of the UN organization in their joint statements. So these statements and these reports are all out there in the public domain. It could be easily accessible, and all of them record the appalling situation of Palestinians in Gaza, civilians in Gaza, as a result of the Israeli attack. The General Assembly has passed a resolution in December 2023 calling for truce, the adherence to international law, protection of civilian, and release of hostages. In the Assembly, one of the state parties one of the state parties, that is of Trinidad and Tobago, said it was incumbent upon the United Nations to bring an immediate end to the suffering of innocent civilians. So what is happening right now is an onslaught on civilians and the breakdown of humanitarian systems and profound disrespect for both international law and the laws of war. And the carnage must stop. The resolution of the General Assembly highlighted the dire need for food, medical supplies, and shelter for civilians affected by the conflict. The resolution criticized the civilian casualties, the high civilian casualties, and destruction of civilian infrastructure, of hospitals, of shelters, of tents, of schools, and so on. So these are the international community and the ones that have the responsibility of various aspects of aid and all that have documented the dire situation that is there in Gaza as a result of the conflict, the genocidal attack by Israel. What kind of, so all the with various arms, as many of them as possible, including the various UN agencies have acted and passed resolution. The one body that has a mandate to keep international peace and security is the major failure of international law with regard to this particular situation. Because the UN Security Council is the only body with mandate to keep international peace and security under Chapter 6 and 7 of the UN Charter. The UN Security Council has passed several resolutions against Israel over the years. Israel is contravening over 30 UN Security Councils dating back to 1968. These are resolutions that require compliance by Israel and Israel alone. For example, just quoting a couple of these resolutions, Resolution 2052, passed in 1968, demands that Israel reverses its annexation of East Jerusalem. Then you have Resolution 446 of 1979, demanding that Israel cease building Jewish settlements in the territories it has occupied. You have Resolution 497 of 1981 that demands Israel reverses its annexation of the Golan Heights. All of these resolutions concerning Israel was passed by the Security Council under Chapter 6 of the UN Charter. And this Chapter 6 do not specify measures of to enforce compliance, such as economic or military sanction. By contrast, the most resolution concerning Iraq in the past and Iran currently are the Chapter 7 resolution, and almost always is accompanied with economic sanctions or other kind of enforcement mechanism. This UN agency, there's no action of the Security Council in the current crisis in the Middle East. The UN Security Council fails to defend international peace and security when a permanent member is a belligerent or a supporter of the belligerent in a conflict in this situation. The USA has, for the third time, vetoed a UN Security Council resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire. And by doing so, it has effectively greenlit more killings and mass sufferings and destruction of Palestinian, almost the annihilation of Palestinians. This failure of the Security Council is a product of its design and will persist so long as the permanent members retain veto power for non-procedural matters like matters under Chapter 6 and 7 of the UN Charter. Now, what are the successes with regard to international law and with regard to its effectiveness? One important is the case at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, and I will present some highlights of that. In January 2024, the International Court of Justice issued provisional measures in a case brought by South Africa against Israel. It is the first international law mechanism to make a determination of genocide against Israel. This is huge because the offense of genocide is very difficult in terms of to make a determination, and that is the reason why many states refrain from using that term. But with an international court like ICJ terming calling what is happening in Palestine by Israel genocide it just compels all other countries to then also accept it and do everything to prevent it. So this case is based on the 1948 Genocide Convention. It accuses Israel of committing acts of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. South Africa alleged that Israel's military actions and policy are intentionally aimed at destroying the Palestinian population in Gaza. In its order, it gave 4 measures to be taken. These 4 measures are: 1, that Israel must take steps to prevent acts that could constitute genocide and ensure the protection of Palestinians in Gaza. 2nd, that it must allow the unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid and services to Gaza. The 3rd is that the destruction of evidence related to alleged genocidal acts must be prevented. And last is that Israel is required to report back to the ICJ within a month of its compliance on these measures. So these measures are legally binding, and failure could comply to international repercussions, one of which is the involvement of the Security Council, which, as we have seen in this case, has been totally ineffective, and there's a complete failure there. The court also emphasized in its order the urgent humanitarian crisis in Gaza, noting the scale of civilian suffering caused by ongoing violence, restriction on aid, and widespread destruction. This decision underscores the international legal framework's role in addressing atrocities, but also highlights the limitation of such rulings when it has no enforcement mechanisms. Now, what has happened? One of the measures ordered by the ICJ was that Israel should report within a month on its compliance with the order. So what has happened on that? There is an Amnesty International report of February that states records the extent to which Israel has or has not complied. So 1 month after the ICJ ordered immediate and effective measures to protect Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip from the risk of genocide, Israel has failed to take even the bare minimum steps to comply. Over the period of 1 month, Israel has continued to disregard its obligation as the occupying power to ensure the basic needs of Palestinians in Gaza are met. This report also states that as the occupying power, under international law, Israel has a clear obligation to ensure the basic needs of Gaza's population are met. Israel has not only failed to provide for their needs, but also been blocking and impeding the passage of sufficient aid into Gaza Strip, in particular to the north, which is virtually inaccessible. Which it shows a contempt for the ICJ, international law in general, the ICJ's ruling, and they continue to be in flagrant violation of its obligation to prevent genocide. Now, in terms of blocking the aid, here are some of the details that they have provided that shows the extent to which the extent of the non-compliance. The supplies entering Gaza before the ICJ order have had, as it is, was a drop in the ocean compared to the needs that over the last 16 years. Yet, in the 3 weeks following the ICJ's order, the number of trucks entering Gaza decreased by about a third, from an average of 146 a day to 3 weeks prior to an average of 100 a day over the subsequent 3 weeks. So before October 7th, that is before October 7th, that is the day on which there was the Hamas attack on Israel, on an average, about 500 trucks entered Gaza every day, carrying basic necessities, commercial goods, medical supplies, fuel, etc. And that quantity fell far short of meeting the needs. But in the 3 weeks of Israel ICJ's ruling, even smaller quantities of fuel made it to Gaza, over which also Israel has tight control. The only crossing that Israel has allowed to open were also open for fewer days, further demonstrating Israel's disregard for the ICJ's provisional measures. Many humanitarian workers reported that there are multiple challenges and said that Israel was refusing to take obvious steps to improve the situation. So that is what the extent to which there is contempt for international law, its obligations under international law by Israel, and to the suffering and the caused by the attacks on the Palestinians. The other measure that is is about the effectiveness of international law is the arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court. Here we'll talk about the arrest warrants a bit and its implications. So less than a month ago, on Thursday, 21 November 2024, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, issued arrest warrants against the commander-in-chief of Hamas's military wing, Diab Ibrahim al-Masri, also known as Dave, for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Israel and Gaza during and after attack on 7th October 2023. Arrest warrants were also issued against for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister Yoav Gallant in respect of war crimes and crimes against humanity alleged to have been committed in Palestine in response to the Hamas attack. So how did all this come about? A bit of background of that is that following a preliminary examination which began in 2015, the ICC, as former prosecutor, opened a formal investigation into possible crimes in Palestine in 2021. On a month after the Hamas attack in October, on 17th November, 5 countries, South Africa, Bangladesh, Bolivia, Comoros, and Djibouti, made a referral to the current ICC prosecutor, who is from the United Kingdom. And upon referral, the prosecutor confirmed that ICC's earlier investigation was ongoing in Palestine, and that investigation extends to the escalation of hostilities and violence after the attacks of the 7th November 2023. So they were including in their investigation whatever that has happened after October 7th as well. The question that many has is Israel is not the state party to the ICC. So how did the ICC issued arrest warrants? So it is ICC is as jurisdiction in respect of crime because of the prosecutor's application, because in 2015 Palestine acceded to the Rome Statute as a state party. Of course, Israel challenged their inclusion, and following that, in May 2018, Palestine self-referred its situation to the prosecutor, triggering an investigation into the matter. So that's how the investigation began. Not all countries in the world today recognize Palestine as a state. Many do, but not all do. But the majority of the countries do. So in 2021, ICC ruled that Palestine is to be considered as a state party to the ICC statute in response to the Israel objection to their inclusion as a state party, because they, of course, do not recognize Palestine as an independent state. So therefore, even though Israel is not a state party, ICC has jurisdiction over Israeli nationals when they commit crimes under the statute in the territory of the state party, which is Palestine. It is on this basis that the investigation was undertaken and the arrest warrant were issued. So what were the crimes for which the arrest warrants were issued? These were against DF, or the Hamas commander-in-chief. It was for the murder of hundreds of civilians following the attack on 7th October and taking of at least 245 hostages. And the pre-trial chamber of the court believed that there is reasonable grounds that he had committed crimes against humanity, several forms of crimes against humanity, of murder, extermination, torture, taking hostages, and so on. It is not clear if Dave is still alive because Israeli government claims that he has been killed. The prosecutor had also originally sought arrest warrant for 2 other Hamas suspects, but they have been confirmed dead by the Israeli government. With regard to the Israeli arrest warrant against the Israeli Prime Minister and the former Defense Minister, the chamber have found reasonable grounds to believe that by restricting humanitarian assistance in Gaza and depriving the civilian population of essential supplies, both of them perpetrated, together with others, war crime of starvation as a method of warfare and crimes against humanity of several forms, murder, persecution, etc., as a result of that. The court also found that both are responsible as civilian superiors for the war crime of intentionally directing attacks against civilians, given their failure to prevent or repress at least 2 incidents of armed attacks. Having issued the arrest warrant, there's a lot of speculation of what will happen next. Will there actually be a trial? So the next steps with regard to procedure is that there will be a confirmation of the charges before the trial. And in that stage, the pre-trial chamber holds a hearing, normally in the presence of the persons that are being charged, to assess whether these charges are supported by sufficient evidence. And to confirm the charges, the court must be satisfied that there is good grounds to believe that the person committed the crimes in question. It is only once the charges are confirmed that the ICC, by the court, that the trial can proceed. At this point, no one actually believes that there will be a trial, but there are several legal and political implications because this arrest warrant is nevertheless hugely important. First and foremost is that the 124 state parties to the Rome Statute are legally required to arrest the suspects and transfer them to court with their general obligation to cooperate fully with the ICC. That the court, in the event that there is a non-compliance of this, the court may decide to refer the offending state to the ICC Assembly of State Parties under the non-compliance procedure. And there is a precedent to that because it did so in the case of Mongolia when the country refused to arrest Putin during his visit this September. So that proceeding is ongoing in the Assembly of State Party. On the political front, Israel and US have clearly voiced opposition to the issue of arrest warrants against Netanyahu. There are threats of sanction against persons connected with the court has been made, and from time to time with regard to the arrest warrants. But not all, but most EU member states have confirmed their obligation to cooperate with the court in executing its warrant, including the UK, as all of them are state parties to the statute. So the fallout of this is that many countries have the obligation to arrest should these individuals against whom arrest warrants are issued come to their countries. And many countries have issued Canada and some of the EU countries have issued statements to say that they will comply with the obligation as state party of the ICC. So that is there. Nobody actually believes that these people Israel president, prime minister, and the former minister will go into any of these four countries. So they are kind of restricted by that. Plus, there are several other important countries who are actively, trying to get this order kind of, either diluted, reversed, or somehow make it not very important. So that is broadly the implication. So whether or not the trial takes place, and irrespective of the reactions from some part of the world, like the United States and other countries who are allies of Israel, the ICC as of now symbolizes the resolve of the larger international community to end impunities for international crime and maintain peace and security in the world. In conclusion, I would just make 4 or 5 observations over here that Israel's disproportionate attack on Palestine is an ongoing catastrophe and has threatened women's peace and security of the region. It is the disproportionate nature and the forms of the attack that has rightly led the ICJ to make a determination of genocidal and to call the attack genocidal. The international law generally has been ineffective, and in the face of the complete and utter defiance of these laws by the nation Israel. It is ineffective when such nation is backed by veto of the P5 member. It is ineffective because of the no enforcement. It is not accompanied with enforcement or adequate or strong enforcement mechanism. The UN Security Council is at risk of fading into irrelevance when all other UN institutions, agencies are actively promoting, protecting, and adhering to international law, given the kind of statements they have made and their documentation with what is happening in the region. The institution, another observation, that institution that has no structure, international institution that has no structure, that like the UN Security Council with veto powers to few, have proved to be more effective with the ICJ and ICC holding Israel accountable within the international law. So that is broadly the thing. I'm looking forward to a conversation if necessary. Here are some of the references for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your enlightening address on the future of equality and dignity, addressing emerging global challenges. We deeply value your insights and thought-provoking perspectives. I would now like to invite our chair, Vibhuti ma'am, to share her remarks. Over to you,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Thank you. I join Avi Sharma in saying that it's a very, very insightful, data-driven, and very exhaustive presentation you have made, Dr. Vahida Nainar. I would just like to know that in this hopeless situation, when the international agencies, even the UN, even the earlier teddy bear kind of a role of UN, that is also not there. It is siding with the murderers. What do you see as a hope? And what civil society organization and social movements can do, because all of us got, at least my generation got uh, active in the global politics, mainly because of the solidarity that we had for the Vietnam Revolution or the Cuban Revolution. And we felt at that time that it was possible for even people, students and youth, to bring the culprits to book and to make them accountable for whatever crimes they were committing against humanity. So do you have any perspective what all is happening even in other countries, and what can be the hope in this
Yeah.
hopeless situation?
Yeah, I would like to reiterate that I would not say that UN has been entirely ineffective. The only body, though it is an important one, the UN Security Council has been ineffective. The entire General Assembly is rooting and wanting for resolutions to be passed, particularly at least the basic one that there must be an immediate ceasefire, which is what the UN Security Council is vetoing. All the other UN agencies are extremely active, seized of the matter. They are talking about it at every forum. You have the special rapporteur on human rights in the Palestine. She's an Italian, Francesca Albanese. She's been talking at every forum about what the situation is and how utterly calling upon all the countries to prevail on Israel for the ceasefire. So I say, with the exception of Security Council, it is simply showing the failure of the structure, and hopefully because of that, I'm not sure that there would be any change in the structure, but there's a lot of demand for a reform in the structure to remove powers of the Security Council. I'm not sure that that would happen, because if it doesn't, it is fading into irrelevance. Or it can go to in the same way as League of Nations. Because if it is not able to do what it is supposed set up to do, then what is the point of its existence at all? Because right now it is just a body that is protecting the interest of the major P5. That's all. That's how it is produced, and many states are calling out them for that. So that is one point. The other more thing is that that is what is happening at that level. But there is civil society, including in Israel. I would like to make that point. There are civil society in Israel, Jewish human rights organizations, women's organizations. I believe in Palestine, it is very difficult now for them to do anything. They are faced with survival issues. But in Israel, there are many civilian organizations that are against their country, that are protesting what Israel government is doing in Gaza. They're supporting the Palestinians. They're calling for ceasefire. They're calling the complete inhuman and barbaric blockade that Israel government is imposing, with its ultimate objective, that is to basically take over the entire and make sure there is no trace of Palestine ever that existed. So that is the hope, and it's not only in Israel and Palestine or in the region, but people around the world. There are many people who are speaking out, who are, having protests, who are having rallies, who are talking out, academics, professional humanitarian organizations, NGOs, international organizations. Many are speaking. That's where the hope lies, because at some point these voices will overtake the voices of, narrow national interest, or it's not even national interest. It's basically, colonial interest of Israel in terms of its expansion. So that's what I would say is where lies the hope. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what, even the very impressive, very heart-touching speeches by the student leaders in Oxford and Yale and Harvard,
Yeah.
very, very moving.
That is despite them being threatened with all kinds of actions. By academics are being threatened with their tenures, or they will, being threatened with irrelevance. Students are being threatened with they've received, because they're up against forces that are very, very powerful. And despite that, many sections of populations, professionals, students, academics, are all speaking out against it. Yeah.
That's hope generating. Dr.
Thank you so
Shalu
much.
Nigam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Shalu Nigam.
Good evening to all of you, and sorry I joined late. But yeah, there are a lot of questions, like the difference between the first world and the third world state, which have been raised for many years. And even in the COVID pandemic, we have seen the whole vaccine nationalism and other kind of issues which came up. So if we talk about the inequalities at the larger level, and the way this human rights implementation mechanism which is being created, which burdens the state, but the role of civil society is something which is not there as strong as it should be. So in this kind of situation, I think what should be done to address it as a larger issue of because this kind of things are happening. We have been seeing for over years that how in Rwanda, in that Rohingya refugees, and so many other cases which have come up and not being resolved. Or it has taken a long time to resolve by the time that the judgment came in. So lot of lives have been lost, and property being destructed. So what should be done in to resolve this kind of situation? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Big question. What can be done to resolve the situation is more of what is happening, more of what is being done by those who can do. That is the only way to resolve the situation. The voices of dissent, the protest must be louder, must be clearer, must be unequivocal, and must be, it should proliferate as much as you can. That is the only solution. The the ICJ and ICC's ruling is one part, and much as there is a non-compliance by Israel and nothing may actually come out, the fact that they actually made that determination of genocide, the ICJ, or the fact that ICC issued an arrest warrant itself is a huge message out to the world. So out to the world. So even the states that are, teetering, and but what about this, and what the in this is done by an international court that talks about procedure, that looks at evidence and then issues the order. So all these measures, it will take for tangible results. But I believe that we are going in that direction, and we just need more of what is really happening, more of them to speak about it, to speak in unequivocal terms, to call, to address the situation as it is, to call it what it is, because what is happening in the region is really not about flushing out terrorists. It's really not about, the 245 hostages. I mean, it is really not about that, because Hamas is practically in the region, is practically decimated over there. And the violence and the bombardment and the attacks continue. So what is this about? This is about the second slide that I showed. That's what it is about. Whatever green is there, they want to that you leave no traces of people of the places that you want to capture or take over. You want to leave no traces of them. That is the agenda. That's what this is happening. And and there is also the political side of it. I was listening to somebody yesterday, and which is also true. There is growing protest within Israel about the policies of the government and what it is doing with the Palestinian. And the government, the prime minister will do nothing for ceasefire, because if he does that, then he has to face his own domestic issues, which he doesn't want to do that. So every despot, every dictatorship kind of a government always need an outside enemy to deflect attention from what is happening domestically. So that's also there. So I think if this immediate situations will change if there is dramatic rebel takeover, change of government in Israel, and that upon pressure from the international community as such, both states and people and citizens of the world. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, but even the role of the US is very questionable, because they are funding the war. They are, like, even in Ukraine and in here in Palestine. So and with Trump winning election, things may get even
It's
more
worse.
worse.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
so I really don't know how to deal with this kind of political whatever that power game which is being played right now. So I don't know how we have to really think
Not
about.
easy, but yeah, ultimately maybe it is naive, but my hope lies within generally people. If there is enough uprising and overthrows Netanyahu, and if somebody comes who is much more moderate, then what will US do with that? If they close into
Along with the movements in the industrialized world, where all citizens pressurize their governments not to sell arms, because all of them
arms.
are thriving, whether it is
Yeah.
Scandinavia or Europe or America or Canada, all of them are selling arms to the Middle East. So this
Israel.
despots should,
Yeah.
not only Israel, all
All
the
of them.
despots,
Yeah.
all the despots in the Gulf. You see the data on
Yeah.
what kind of trade relations they have. No?
Yeah. And yes,
Challenges.
it's not
Shub,
easy. Yeah.
shub number 2. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Yes, ma'am. It was very insightful. It was lovely to hear you. My question is, ma'am, regarding to the refugee status currently of the Palestinians. For example, after the 1948 Nakba, a lot of countries around Israel, Palestine, like Jordan, Egypt, they opened their borders. They took in Palestinian refugees. Even the Western countries took in, Asian countries took in Palestinian refugees. But after October 7, last year, none of the Islamic countries have actively taken in any Palestinian refugees at all. They simply rejected it. Uh, uh, there are few European countries who are asking, who are nodding yes to the refugees, but none of the Islamic countries are taking in as such. So, what is the possible reason for declining it? Like, for example, Egypt has a strong wall, larger wall than the wall of Mexico. So, why is it that they are not taking in Palestinians?
Um,
Yes,
there is it's interesting what their stated reason is. It's like they're saying, if we take the refugees, you're actually supporting Israel. Then you will empty out Palestine. Then where Israel will. One of the reasons, I'm not saying that is the only one, that then there, if all Palestinians leave and become refugees elsewhere, which land will they return to? Because then the land is what they want, and Israel will have it, capture it, and then it complicates matter. Then basically they say accepting refugees, which has no substance, which I don't believe has any it's a theoretical argument to say, but really practically, when people are fleeing attacks, where will they go? I mean, they will go in the neighboring countries, they will go to wherever it's possible, you see. So in reality, that argument doesn't hold, but in theory, that's what is one of the reasons that some of these countries have said that they do not want to open the borders, because that will feed into or make it possible for Israel to capture the entire region and make sure that Palestine doesn't exist at all. Because if all the people go away, who is there to claim up the state of Palestine? So I have read that as one of the reasons to do that. But yeah, it's very difficult. And in the current crisis, I believe the blockades are such that they're not being allowed to even leave to become a refugee elsewhere. That is another problem. As I mentioned in one of my things, one small point is open for entry and exit into to the region. So people are just being, how do you call it, cornered. It's a very small area, the Gaza Strip, and they're all cornered into that. And all the exit points are heavily manned by armed Israeli forces. People are not allowed to, definitely, aid is not allowed to get in, but even Palestinians are not allowed to get out. So it is a dire state there, situation there.
Uh,
A very
can I
unfortunate
mm,
one, yes.
can I have a follow-up question?
Sure.
So I have two more questions, like in parts. So we talked extensively about the ICC, the role of ICC. So one of the head at ICC is Karim Khan, who played a key role in issuing the arrest
Right.
warrant. But are these actors really very credible? Because don't you think they are being slightly selective about issuing this arrest warrants when there is Pakistan, for example, which is thrashing its minorities, even the Muslim sect, other minority sects of Muslim faith. And then there are countries like Iran, which is almost every time, which is like after the death of Mahsa Amini, Iran has been at the limelight for human rights violations. So why not issue arrest warrants against these actors to the supreme leader of Iran, or even the dictators of Syria? Uh, so they are not issuing arrest warrants against these people. They are being selective about it. Your comment on that?
Yeah.
And my second part of the question is regarding Middle East again. That how are we sure? We all of us are talking about, yes, the Jews have a right to a state. They have a right to go back to their homelands, as well as the Palestinians. But how are we so sure that Israel will not be converted into one of the other Middle East countries? Looking at the history of Middle East, when it was a Christian majority, pagan majority, rich region, and then there were the Islamist invaders who converted the entire region to what it is today. How are we so sure that Israel will remain Jewish if there is a possible two state event? These are my two questions now.
Okay, I'll answer your first question. The ICC being selective. Now, that is directly related to understanding the ICC structure and how investigations are triggered. The prosecutor doesn't have the power to just go into one situation and start an investigation. So these are mostly procedural matters. There has to be a referral. Somebody has to refer a situation to the ICC for him to start an investigation. So it doesn't have, although he does have suo motu powers to do, but there has to be there has to be what do you call, referral of situation. People have to come forward and say that these are the situations with a lot of evidence. And you have to remember, a criminal court's evidentiary requirement is very, very high. For example, and they don't do, it's not for violation of human rights. International Criminal Court is not a human rights court. It is the court that does laws of war. So yes, there is a human rights violation in many of the countries that you have state, but are there war crimes and are there crimes against humanity? That is the question. And who has referred? So at any given point, there are several ongoing investigations that the prosecutor is conducting, because his office receives a lot of referrals of various situations from NGOs, from all that. And then he examines it to see whether these are violations of the laws of war. Are there war crimes? Are there crimes against humanity? These are the two situations under of which ICC has a jurisdiction. So given, and then if it goes through, the investigations goes through and achieves a certain level of evidence, it's only then that he can take that evidence and go to the pretrial chamber and say, now I have so much, these are the potential cases that we would like to investigate. With a lot of documents, it goes and says, we want an arrest warrant. So the procedure is very, very detailed and very, how do you say, not cumbersome, but the threshold is very high. So while there are several ongoing investigations, it proceeds only where it has reached a certain level. So that is the two response I would give to your question. One is that it is not a human rights court. So it will not look into human rights violations, which are happening in all of these regions that you said. But I believe that there are similar violations in Syria. There are war crimes, the crimes within the jurisdiction of court in the Syria, definitely. Within in Turkey, borders of Turkey and Kurdish, there are the similar kind of violations which will fall within the jurisdiction of court. And I believe there are ongoing investigations happening. And when that levels, when there are proper referrals and investigation gets enough material, then it will proceed to that trial stage. When I was part of these negotiations of the International Criminal Court statute, when it happened before 98, before it was adopted, what at that point was that none of the Western countries or countries supported by Western countries will ever be put on the block there. There will ever be arrest warrant issued. But now an arrest warrant against Israeli um, prime minister basically breaks that perception, because that is one of the so-called Western countries with huge support of most of the Western countries. And also that thing that this possibility gives me hope that, because one of the major criticism is, yeah, it, prosecutes only despots from Africa and Latin America and places like that in small countries. So only there's this. And it will never do, the Western countries or the more powerful countries or more developed countries. But this arrest warrant is the first that breaks that particular myth. So there's a little bit of hope over there. So that's as far as the first question go. Frankly, I must confess, I did not quite understand the second question, except what the last thing you said. How can we be sure that the Jewish state will continue to remain Jewish?
Yes, ma'am. Looking at
Correct?
yes, ma'am, when we look at the history of the entire Middle East, which was
Ah,
one Christian majority and pagan majority states, and they were rich and flourishing, and they also let in a lot of Muslims in the name of inclusivity for multiculturalism. But then gradually they converted the entire region to Islamic region. And then we know the situation there. So it's only Israel left in the center. So how do we know, even if there is, for example, tomorrow a two-state solution and there are two states, uh, will Israel be safe in the middle of it all? Because the history does not say that Islamic invaders or Islamists or any influx of Muslims have spared any non-Muslims as such. So that is my question.
I'm not sure. I guess that is how the history has evolved, and it is the current conflict kind of situations that shapes the history. It is just like we have the conflict right now. There have been several conflicts and events historically that has happened that has changed the profile of the region in terms of who are there and who are not there, and there is various history to that. what will happen in future and how it will happen, I'm not sure really I can have the answer to that. Yes, the profile and the nature of the population has changed because of various historic events. It is changing right now, currently, as we speak, because of the conflict. And yes, it might change in future as well, given what will happen in future. But what that will be, I'm not sure I'm in a position to, answer that.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank
Sure,
you.
thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your inspiring and engaging talk with us. It's always a pleasure learning from you. We look forward to having you at our future IMPRI events as well. Moving on forward with our next session for today, I would now like to invite Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigamji, visiting Senior Fellow IMPRI, advocate, author, and researcher, gender and human rights, for her session on legal hands-on and interactive session. We extend, ma'am, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. It was a wonderful session for today's Human Rights Day. But yeah, and maybe I'll just continue with that kind of discussion, and maybe we'll talk more about India and what's happening over here when we talk about in terms of sustainable development and human rights in India. So we all know we have Sustainable Development Goals 2030, and these are grouped into five main categories as people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership, and basically divided into 17, sub goals. It talks about eradicating poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable clean energy, decent work, industry innovation, reducing inequalities, sustainable cities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace and justice, and also strong institutions. So but when we talk about the situation on the ground, we have very good, we talk about sustainable goals, we talk about equality, we talk about human rights, but what is happening at the ground level is that even in terms of basic necessities such as right to water, now each day women and girls are collectively spending around 200 million hours collecting water. This is the UNICEF report in 2016. Then there is another report in 2021 which says that less than 17% of employees in the water sector are women. And in less than 50 countries, we have laws or policies that specifically mention women's participation in rural sanitation or water resource management. This is again 2021 report. So it's like, we all know that women heavily rely on healthy freshwater system, and as such they're guardians of these systems. They possess essential knowledge. They can contribute to restoration and conservation of freshwater system, but still women are being denied role in the decision making at when we talk about the collection of waters. So what is happening is like what has happened in India in past is that a lot of struggles which have been taking place. So I'll mention few of them. Now one is about which was started by by the local people against the Coca-Cola company. This happened in 2000 in Kerala, where Coca-Cola was establishing a plant in one of the district in Kerala, and it employed 130 permanent workers and 250 temporary workers. And basically, this plant was made on a land which was used to grow paddy, peanuts, and vegetables. And the plant took all the groundwater and almost 500,000 liters of water every day to produce those beverages. So the local villagers, they protested. They said that there is water pollution which is happening. There is shortage of water for irrigation, and the wells are filled with toxic chemicals. So the matter went to the court, and for years the litigation continued, and eventually they have to close the plant. So basically, that people have to struggle at the very basic level to really fight for their right to water. Similarly, we all know about Chipko movement, but basically it was in 1970s in Himalayas, that women opposed the construction of a dam and a thermal plant over there. And these women contended that these projects are leading to destruction of biodiversity. They are leading to, a lot of illegal activities by timber mafia, and it's contributing to environmental degradation, erosion of forest covers. So the women protested. You may have seen the pictures of women, uh, you know, uh, near protecting the tree. So local women were deprived of their customary access to forest resources, and various forms of atrocities were committed. But still, this fight continued for a long time, and a lot of women participated in that movement. Similarly, if I talk about Nyamgiri's struggle, now again, Ministry of Environment and Forest, they entered into memorandum with Vedanta resources to mine bauxite. Now the tribal, they protested, they started a satyagraha, and various investors from the foreign land also, they withdraw their funds from Vedanta. So finally this struggle, they have to struggle at in a very it's very arduous, very kind of struggle, very long struggle. And these tribals have been living for generations in forest, and they are dependent upon those shifting cultivation and collecting minor forest produce. So then a committee was formulated, and in its report, it says that primitive tribal groups are eligible for protection. And in 2014, ministry was forced to issue a complete ban on mining. So this case again went to the court for a long time. The Supreme Court came out with a judgment in 2013. But right now, the report says that the tribals are still facing police atrocities. So, because even after the Supreme Court decision to really ban the mining, there are forces which are, uh, uh, harassing the local tribal people. We all know of the Bhopal gas disaster and the tragedy where on the night of between 2 to 3 December 1984, the Union Carbide, pesticide plant in Bhopal, where the toxic gas leaked, and it affected the millions of people. Like, for generations, people are being affected. The estimate of death toll varies. In some report, it says that only 5 lakhs people being affected. Some report says that you know uh, more people were affected. The Madhya Pradesh government, they have paid compensation to only 3787 people till 2008. Um, other the reports, some of the reports estimate that 8,000 died within 2 weeks. And the lawyers, academics, and journalists, they have described this disaster as an ecocide. And so that even many of the people are not being provided the compensation. So you can read the entire history. The case went up to the Supreme Court, and even till now, some people, they came to protest, and the things are still going on, not being settled for such a long time has been passed. So even right now, in one of the forest, the Hasde forest, now again this mining project has been passed, and basically big corporates are being involved in this project, and right now also the struggle is going on, where the report claims that more than 8 lakhs of forest in the trees are being cut, and people are being displaced, despite of whatever history we have seen of tribal struggles. Though there are laws such as Forest Act, there is Panchayat PSA Act, Panchayat Extension of Scheduled Area Act. So, those kind of laws are there. But despite of those laws, we have, these kind of things which are being taking place, where government corporate nexus is, trying to, in the name of development, what is being, happening is more of destruction. So these are the kind of these are the kind of cases which raise questions about the policies, the development policies, because we have introduced the policy of LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization during 1990s. And recently, we have a discussion around the projects of Make in India. But how much we are prepared? Are we prepared in terms of safety measures, public health, reduction of health hazards, the impact on environment? So how this free market policy versus human health and human rights issues should be balanced? What are the values we are placing on human lives vis-a-vis market-oriented development? So overall, these struggles show that the kind of neoliberal model we are adopting, it has failed. It is taking away people's right to life and livelihood. It shows complete disregard for the people and the environment. The mining and the capitalistic projects like the Union Carbide, so they have adverse impact. They are displacing and killing hundreds and thousands of people. They are causing loss of biodiversity. But still, we are, in the name of development, we are following these kind of projects. So development has different dimensions, but it should be inclusive development. We can't think of just development of corporates. We have to talk about people's development, people-centered development. We have to talk about the vulnerable sections. So we have to take into account the comprehensive development and not just economic growth of the few people. We have talked about inequalities, over past few of the sessions. So why can't we think of development which is more fairer, which is more equal, and if we could create more safer and equal societies? So we have to draw the connection between sustainable development goals to gender participation and to environmental conservation in our country. So when we talk about gender participation, we have to talk about women as farmers, women as tribals, women who conserve forest resources. They're been working as workers, homemakers. So they are the managers of natural resources and bring in wealth of knowledge and skills to preserve and conserve natural resources. But there is the kind of development model which we have adopted is more about taking away this kind of you know resources from people and giving it to capitalist kind of thing. So when we talk about sustainable development, what kind of development we are talking about, we have to think of that. The model of ecofeminism was given a long time back. You can read the work of Vandana Shiva and Maria Mais. They have talked about ecofeminist kind of a model, and where the paradigm, this model talk about paradigm shift in understanding and cultivating relationship with nature. It talks about challenging the patriarchal norms, which are entrenched in corporate driven agriculture and industrial food production. So this model talk about feminist principles in terms of caring, conserving, and regenerating the value of all life forms. Now there is whole movement which called for space where women play a important role in preserving variety of seeds and uh, uh, those are the women who are opposing genetically modified crops, which is threatening our traditional practice. So what needs to be done is we have to empower women in policy making process, and we have to address the gender disparities. So we have to recognize the gendered impact of climate change. So we have to talk about alternative models of inclusive development. So as alternative to neoliberal model of development, we have to pay attention to the issues of marginalized, and we talk about democratic ideas. So we have to invest in health, education, and strengthening women's organization. So what more can be done is that linking the gender equality, human rights, and women empowerment in terms of environmental work, in terms of socioeconomic outcomes, in terms of fairer distribution of wealth, better conservation of forest and natural resources, and this whole movement which demands that agricultural area needs more research, more investment in terms of distributing land and distributing profits, and we to reduce inequalities. So we have to talk about women participation in managing natural resources, and specifically if we talk about tribal women, they possess unique knowledge. Now, there are researchers which says that these kind of unique knowledge is being timed. So how can we preserve that? So those are the questions we have to talk about. So the thing is that we have to destroy patriarchy. We have to end this neoliberal kind of model, which is creating more inequalities, and we have to strengthen human rights. I'll just stop here and maybe we can have more discussions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It is always, we extend our heartfelt gratitude for the legal hands-on and interactive session and for sharing your insights with us. Now, I would like to invite our chair, Vibhuti ma'am, to share her remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Shalu Nigam, for bringing in the question of sustainable development goal and mainstreaming gender concerns in all 17 goals. And at the same time, the last goal, which talks of peace, harmony, global cooperation, I think that can't be done without environmental justice or distributive justice or social justice. So there can't be peace without justice. That also you have conveyed so well. So I think both you and Vaida, with the case study of Palestine and Gaza, and bringing in the whole discourse of what the Sustainable Development Goals are offering. I think it's very important to be reminded of this on this International Human Rights Day. It's very important. Yes,
Thank you, ma'am. So any questions we have from the
Abhishek Shaw.
Yes, ma'am. Abhishek ji, if you would like to ask a question.
Yes, yes. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Good evening to everyone. So, ma'am, my question relates to you. You talked and gave a deep insights on the sustainable development goals and how the economic policies should align. Ma'am, don't you think this sustainable development goals are a flaw and obstacles to underdeveloped countries as mentioned by the Western propaganda? It is just a barrier for the third world countries to become developed and challenge them.
Oh, sorry, what do you want to say? Like, are you saying that these goals are challenged to like the development because we should follow the new liberal model of development, or what are you suggesting? I have to really understand.
No, ma'am, I'm not suggesting anything. The whole SDGs which has been laid out, I am
Yeah.
not telling they are completely a flaw in its own terms. But is it not how the Western countries or the first world countries are promoting them to stop the third world countries being developed? Because in the discourse of development, there will be climate, how the ecosystem will be challenged in itself, and we see development only in terms of how much growth we have, how much GDP we have, and per capita income. And when we when we compare the per capita income, there has to be how much industrialization a country has done. So there is a lot of link between this economic growth. So I want to know your insight. Does SDGs have or becoming a barrier to the underdeveloped countries to being developed?
No, I don't see this as barriers to development because we are talking about inclusive development. We are not saying that there should be no development, but we say that development should be such that it should be beneficial to all, it should include all. So you have to talk about, it's not the difference between the first world countries or the third world countries. What we are talking about, not only like the countries like India or whatever other third world countries, but we have to talk about the entire, to talk about the entire planet. So, okay, yeah, sure. Maybe you can say that the developed countries are generating more, kind of waste, and they're dumping waste. So that Union Carbide thing is one of the example. what happened in Bhopal, that the company from America, it came to India and they started this thing, and then the person went away, Anderson, who started this company, and he went out to the India when this entire episode happened. And so those kind of things are there. So that is what, when this entire model of neoliberal kind of development, which is being proposed by the World Bank, is it feasible? Is it really talking about what kind of development it is talking about? When we talk of economic development, are we talking about unequal development? Because right now, when we have adopted these policies of liberalization since 90s, now what we are seeing in India, how the resources which have been generated, they are being unequally distributed. So if you go through the reports, the richer, maybe a handful of rich people are getting more richer and poor are getting more poorer. So do we want this kind of development? These are some of the questions that we have to really, think about when we talk about development. And basically, when you talk about, say, per capita development, or, success in economic terms, but what about success in terms of, equities, reducing inequalities, social justice? So where are those things? Because for 75 years of independence of India, have we really, if we measure that kind of development, the kind of development which we are having, are we able to reach out to the most marginalized, more vulnerable kind of people? So what are the problems which have hindered to reach out to those people? So I'm thinking about all those issues when I talk about development. So I'm not comparing it, and even at the world level also, if you talk about the development again, we have America. In America, we have this Occupy movement, which was entirely about we are 99%, that 1% of people, of the rich people, they are holding all resources. So what kind of development we are talking about when we talk about within India and also at the world level? So there are certain countries which talk about measurement in terms of happiness, measurement in terms of success, not success, not in economic terms, but more in terms of happiness index. So that is something. Should we follow that? We have to think about all those issues. This is, I just want to say. So anything you would like to add?
Yes, ma'am. I completely agree on what you have said there, the increased inequality between the richer and the poorer. But the fact also, we have seen that people coming out of the below poverty line in last 75 years. I per se, like you now said, are what should be the exact planning for the neoliberalism policy which countries are adopting. So my last question is, ma'am, what kind of policy are you suggesting that country like India, who is still developing in the eyes of Western world? Because I too finding answers on what is the meaning of development and why this whole development word has emerged and so promptly is discussed in the world. So, what type of policy are you thinking or suggesting towards uh, all equal, uh, all equal initiative or inclusivity, if not the LPG? Because in India, what my professors has till now emphasized, there is no debate. We as a think tank have what do you accepted LPG. In India, there is no economical debates happening. So what if you're raising this topic of a economical debate that we should not go towards neoliberalism, then where should we move forward, or which kind of public policy we should adapt for economic growth with inclusivity of climate changes and SDGs, and as you mentioned, that destroy the patriarchy and adopt something else.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about, that it's not only about India, and I'm not thinking from the Western perspective. As an Indian citizen, I'm talking about India, and also if I see at the world level, a lot of the policy of neoliberal development, it has not only affected India, it has also affected the Western countries. So these inequalities which are being rising not only in India, but even in world at the level of global level, inequalities have affected developed countries as well as the developing countries. So we have to question this neoliberal model. But then what is the suggestion? What is the alternative? So that is what we are saying, that alternative model has to think about the people's oriented kind of development. It is not about making profit. It is about reaching out to people to see that the poverty should be eliminated, and all the sustainable development goal, whatever it is saying, that reduce inequalities. Of course, it is being written by the UN, and at that level there may be discussions. So but then you can't say it's just entirely completely Western model. It is model which where even the lot of developing countries have participated during the discussion, and this model is being prepared to counter the kind of neoliberal model which is being proposed. So that there is one model of neoliberalism which is being proposed by the World Bank and this entire economic group. But there is an alternative human rights model which talks about sustainability, which talks about inclusion, which talks about equalities. So what development which we are proposing, that like the Vandana Shiva and that Amare Mai's book on ecofeminism, which is talking about. So that is a kind of alternative model, that you empower women, that you empower the tribal groups which have more knowledge, which have more traditional knowledge. So when you say that in India we don't have discussion, yes, we do have discussions, but the thing is that those discussions have not entered into the mainstream kind of decision making sphere. So we have to look into all those alternative visions that are available within India, because we can't again, if you say that I will in my thinking, this neoliberal model is being kind of forced by the West, forced by the World Bank, and those kind of groups. So we have to develop an alternative model to that, and that is there available in India when we talk about women empowerment, when we talk about tribals empowerment. So it has to be inclusive model. That is what I'm suggesting.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your inspiring and engaging talk with us. It's always a pleasure learning from you. We look forward to having you at our future IMPRI events as well. Now, I would like to request Madam Chair for her closing remarks.
So I think we had a very interesting discussion today, and this is on this very historically important day. Human Rights Day is the time to reflect on importance of equality, dignity, freedom for everyone, everywhere, and that is why I think it's very important to get reminded by all those in different parts of the world who are questioning jingoism, who are questioning despot, and who are demanding right to education, freedom of expression, protection from discrimination. And if we take this step forward, creating a fairer and more compassionate society, and this is very crisply encapsulated by the statement which the Russian feminists made within those who are in Russia and who are fighting against and who are anti-war protesters. No, and they came out in Pushkin Square in February. You know, February in Russia is extremely cold with a very low temperature, but thousands of women, Russian women, came out and they declared, and I quote, "War means violence, poverty, forced displacement, broken lives, insecurity, lack of a future. It is irreconcilable with essential values and goals of feminist movement. War exacerbates gender inequality and sets back gains for human rights by many years. War brings with it not only violence of bombs and bullets, but also sexual violence, as history shows, During war, the risk of being raped increases several times for any woman. For this and many other reasons, Russian feminists and those who share feminist values need to take a strong stand against this war unleashed by leadership of our country, and that's what they say. So, and I think this is the message to all of us, that all of us, wherever we are, we have to fight against this kind of injustice. And also what, as Dr. Shalu Nigam said, that we have to also strive for whatever proclamations are made in sustainable development goals, all those 17 goals, they are the conscience keeper of the global community. And we need to, under any form of adversities, whether they are neoliberal policy or the repressive state or the billionaire controlled media, which doesn't publish our news. We have to only depend on the social media. But still, we, each one of us, if we continue to make our efforts, then I think we can reshape the world, and we can also we can also demand accountability of the barbaric elite or the predators who are creating so much of human misery and so much of deprivation in hunger. At one level, we have reached the industry 4.0, massive uh, technological advancement, the resources, intellectual resources, technological resources have created a condition where everyone can lead a dignified life. But it is the vested interests which are not allowing it. The whole craze for concentration of economic power, political power, that is creating this. And then the only answer, as Dr. Shalu Nigam said, is a people's movement. People, all of us have to stick out our neck. We have to take stand, and we have to reshape the world. With that pledge, I think our commemoration of International Human Rights Day, and whatever the legacy our for mothers like Dr. Hensa Mehta and so many stalwarts have given, and Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, father of Indian Constitution. I think we need to continue that glorious legacy, and the future generation will never forgive us if we don't do that, and we just remain a silent spectator. So being a cynical or being a silent spectator is not a luxury that the 21st century world allows us to have. Even at the age of 70, if I have enthusiasm, I'm sure that you from the younger generation are going to do much more than what our generation did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. If you would say, should we proceed with the formal vote of thanks now?
Yeah.
Thank you. As we come to the end of day 6 of the LPPYF Law and Public Policy Use Fellowship, Cohort 4.0, Winter 2024. Theme: Inclusivity in Peace and Conflict Resolution, Rethinking Policy, Advocacy, and Implementation, an online national winter school program, a 3-month immersive online law and public policy awareness certificate training course, and internship program. I, Avi Sharma, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, New Delhi. We are grateful to our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, and the experts for the day 6 session, Ms. Vahida Nainar ji and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, for taking out their valuable time and for their thought-provoking insights on the topics. We thank all our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you all on day 7 of the certification course on December 17, 2024, that is the next Tuesday, featuring distinguished experts Professor Anuradha M. Chinoy, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, and a creative project presentation and discussion by our team. We would be grateful if you watch us later on YouTube, listen to us on various podcasts, and read our publications. We hope you continue to join in the future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you all a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Avi, for moderating the session, and also
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Shalu.